The Galactic Council, a coalition of the most advanced alien species in the galaxy, wielded its influence like an iron fist wrapped in velvet. They controlled the flow of trade, the allocation of resources, and the maintenance of security across countless star systems. To the Council, they were the rightful guardians of order, responsible for overseeing the balance of power among all known civilizations. For centuries, they had viewed humanity as a convenient, if naive, addition to their grand design, a race that could be useful but was always kept on the periphery, never quite allowed into the inner circle of decision-making. Humanity had played their part, contributing to the galactic economy by providing labor and resources. In exchange, they had been granted a measure of technological knowledge and limited influence in Council decisions. But the Council never saw them as equals. They were regarded as industrious yet inexperienced, always striving but never quite grasping the deeper intricacies of galactic politics and power. Things changed when humanity made a discovery that sent ripples through the galactic community. In a remote star system on the fringes of known space, human explorers stumbled upon a vast new energy source. This energy was unlike anything they had encountered before, a raw, pulsing force that seemed to defy conventional understanding of physics and power generation. The initial team, a mix of scientists and engineers, realized the potential immediately. If harnessed correctly, this energy could power entire fleets, develop new weapons, or fuel a civilization for centuries. At first, humanity kept the discovery secret. The energy source was studied in underground facilities, far from prying eyes. Human scientists began to explore its possibilities with excitement, and a sense of independence that they had never felt before. This could be their chance to elevate themselves, to advance beyond the limitations imposed by the Galactic Council. The rumors, however, could not be contained for long. Whispers of the discovery began to spread throughout the galaxy. Traders and diplomats carried tales of an energy so powerful that it could tilt the scales of power in unpredictable ways. The Council, ever vigilant for threats to their dominance, quickly took notice. The idea of a new energy source in human hands, with the potential to disrupt the carefully maintained balance of power, was unacceptable. They saw the beginnings of a challenge to their authority, a risk that humanity might grow beyond its assigned role. Fearing humanity's potential rise to power, they decided to act before the situation spiraled out of control. The Council convened in secret, their leaders exchanging tense glances and whispered discussions. After a brief debate, they agreed on a course of action. They would orchestrate a series of covert attacks on human colonies and resource convoys. These attacks would be disguised as rogue alien incursions or pirate raids, ensuring that the humans could not easily trace the source. The goal was simple: destabilize humanity's efforts, disrupt their development of the energy source, and force them back into a state of dependence. Within weeks, the attacks began. Human settlements on the outer colonies were hit by sudden raids, their defenses overwhelmed by unknown forces. Resource convoys disappeared without a trace, ambushed in deep space where no help could reach them. Reports flowed in of massive explosions, of ships being torn apart by weapons that left no identifiable signature. Panic spread across human territories as the assaults grew in frequency and ferocity. At first, the humans believed these were random acts of violence, the work of pirates or rogue factions testing their strength. But soon, the patterns began to emerge. The attacks were too coordinated, too precise. They seemed to target specific assets critical to humanity's development of the new energy source, always striking at moments when defenses were at their weakest. The chaos and confusion among human settlements grew, and the Council watched with satisfaction, believing their plan was succeeding. However, humanity's intelligence agencies began to dig deeper. They intercepted strange, encrypted transmissions that seemed to originate from deep within Council-controlled space. Analysts and cryptographers worked tirelessly to decode these messages, piecing together fragments of data from the various attacks. They began to notice anomalies in the supposed pirate raids, weapon signatures that matched Council arsenals, ships moving with patterns that suggested military precision, not the haphazard tactics of raiders. As more data came to light, the pieces began to fit together. The rogue attacks, were too well executed to be the work of random marauders. The humans realized they were not dealing with scattered pirates or outlaws, but something far more coordinated, something that bore the unmistakable mark of the Galactic Council. Humanity's leaders convened in an emergency session. Around a long table, the mood was somber but determined. They knew now that they had been betrayed by their supposed allies. The Council, who had always treated them as a lesser species, had struck first, seeking to keep them subservient and compliant. A heated discussion erupted, with some advocating for immediate retaliation, while others called for caution. The decision, however, was made quickly. They would not respond with brute force, at least, not yet. Instead, they would issue a warning, one that would make it clear that humanity was not going to accept this betrayal quietly. They crafted a single, unmistakable message and broadcast it across all known frequencies, ensuring it would reach every corner of the galaxy and, most importantly, the ears of the Galactic Council. The message was simple. Run! It was a single word, loaded with intent. It was both a challenge and a promise, a statement that said humanity was done playing by the Council's rules. The warning was clear, but the Council dismissed it as mere bravado, a desperate attempt by a weaker race to bluff their way out of trouble. They laughed at the thought that humans could threaten them. Humanity's leaders gathered in a secure underground facility, their expressions resolute as they discussed their response to the Council's betrayal. They knew that a conventional military retaliation would play directly into the Council's hands. The Council expected them to strike back with brute force, to fall into a trap where the might of the galactic fleets could crush them openly. But humanity had no intention of playing the role assigned to them. They had a different plan. Instead of mobilizing their existing fleets for a head-on battle, they chose to weaponize the new energy source they had discovered. This energy, with its unique properties, offered potential beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. It could be shaped into weapons with incredible range and destructive power, far exceeding the capabilities of any known technology. Humanity's scientists and engineers had already begun developing prototypes in secret, turning their research efforts into a covert arms race. The leaders decided to send a clear message to the Galactic Council, one that would signal their readiness to fight but on their own terms. The message was short and direct. Run! It was a single word, but it carried with it a weight of intent. It was broadcast on every known frequency, ensuring that every member of the galactic community would hear it. The message was chillingly simple, hinting at something much larger than anyone could comprehend. When the Galactic Council received the message, they dismissed it almost immediately. In their arrogance, they could not conceive that humanity, despite their newfound resourcefulness, could pose any real threat. Many of the Council members laughed at the audacity of such a warning, mocking the idea that humans could ever challenge their authority. To them, it was a desperate bluff, a feeble attempt to scare them into backing down. Run? One Council member scoffed during a private meeting, his voice dripping with disdain. Run from what? They're children playing with fire. They can't possibly believe they could threaten us. Some members, however, were less amused. A few among the Council proposed more direct action, suggesting an invasion or a blockade to crush any thoughts of rebellion before they could gain momentum. We should strike now, argued a senior advisor, his voice filled with urgency. Show them the consequences of defiance before they grow too bold. Eliminate any chance they have of gaining ground. Others dismissed this, seeing no need for such drastic measures. Let them bluster, another retorted, waving a dismissive hand. It's a bluff, nothing more. They don't have the power to match their words. The consensus was clear. Humanity's warning was to be ignored, treated as the idle threat of a lesser species. They could not grasp the full extent of what they were facing, and their confidence blinded them to the real danger. Meanwhile, humanity was moving swiftly. They knew they had only a limited window of opportunity before the Council decided to take more decisive action. In hidden facilities, far from prying eyes, human scientists and engineers worked around the clock to harness the new energy source's unique properties. They developed weapons unlike any the galaxy had ever seen, weapons that could target and destroy ships from unimaginable distances, shields that could repel the most powerful blasts, and systems that could disrupt enemy fleets with precision. These new technologies were tested in secret, away from the eyes of the Council and their spies. Human fleets were quietly repositioned, moving under the cover of dark nebulae, hiding within asteroid fields where no conventional sensors could detect them. They prepared for the inevitable escalation, readying themselves for a conflict that they knew was coming. Every move was calculated, every piece carefully placed on the board for the moment they would strike. As the preparations continued, reports began to trickle in from distant sectors. Strange phenomena were observed, massive energy surges that distorted space-time, stars dimming momentarily, and entire ships disappearing without a trace. The events were scattered and seemingly random, but they carried an undercurrent of something ominous. The Council began to receive these reports, and for the first time, a flicker of doubt crept into their minds. A few of the more cautious Council members started to express concern. "We may be underestimating them," one murmured during a closed session, reviewing the strange incidents. "These phenomena, they coincide with human activity. What if they've truly found a way to harness that energy?" But their warnings were dismissed by the majority. "Paranoia," another member declared with confidence. "We are the dominant force in this galaxy. Whatever they are doing, we will crush it before it becomes a threat. There is no reason to believe we could be at risk from a species we've kept under control for centuries." The Council remained convinced of their invincibility, confident in their power and their long-held superiority. They could not imagine a scenario where they would have to flee from humans. Their hubris blinded them to the growing threat, leaving them vulnerable to what was coming next. The moment came without warning. Across multiple sectors of Council-controlled space, humanity launched its first strike with surgical precision. The targets were chosen carefully: key military outposts, strategic supply lines, and vital communication hubs. The human fleets, hidden and prepared, moved with a speed and stealth that no one in the galaxy had expected. The new weapons, powered by the mysterious energy source they had harnessed, unleashed massive beams of energy that tore through space with terrifying force. The effect was immediate and devastating. Council outposts, once thought impregnable, disintegrated in an instant as the energy beams struck them with pinpoint accuracy. Ships stationed at the military docks evaporated in a blinding flash before their crews even knew they were under attack. Stations designed to withstand the might of entire fleets were reduced to molten slag, their defenses bypassed as if they were made of paper. In a matter of minutes, whole fleets were vaporized, unable to raise their shields or mount any defense. Chaos erupted within the Council as reports of the attack flooded in from every corner of their territory. The Council leaders, seated in their chambers, were caught off guard, unable to comprehend the scale and power of the new weapons they faced. They had expected a challenge, perhaps some minor resistance, but nothing like this. Entire sectors were going dark, communication channels were filled with frantic calls for help, and the remains of their fleets were scattered and broken, drifting aimlessly through space. Panic spread rapidly through the Council's ranks. "We are under attack! All stations report massive losses!" shouted one officer over the communication channels, his voice edged with fear. The Council members scrambled to mobilize their defenses, but the speed and intensity of the human assault left them reeling. They were unprepared for this level of destruction, this sudden shift in power dynamics. An emergency session was convened in the Council's Grand Chamber, the mood tense and chaotic. Council members argued vehemently, their voices raised in fear and anger. "We must retaliate immediately," demanded one of the more hawkish members, slamming his fist on the table. "We cannot allow humans to think they can strike at us with impunity." Others urged caution. "We have underestimated them," a senior member cautioned, his face pale. "These weapons, they are beyond anything we have encountered. We need to understand what we are dealing with before we make a move." But there was no time for understanding. Humanity continued their assault, launching strike after strike with unrelenting precision. Key targets across different sectors were hit in quick succession, each attack calculated to cripple the Council's ability to respond effectively. Supply lines were severed, cutting off fuel and ammunition to frontline fleets. Strategic outposts were obliterated, leaving entire sectors defenseless. Human fleets moved with a coordination that confounded the Council's strategists. They struck and disappeared before the Council could mount a counterattack, their ships moving faster than expected, aided by the strange energy that powered their new weapons. The Council's own fleets, despite their technological superiority, were falling one by one, unable to withstand the sheer power of the human weapons. Shield generators overloaded, engines were crippled, and entire ships were shattered into fragments. As the losses mounted, the Council's desperation grew. They began to realize that their traditional tactics were failing them. Their fleet commanders were issuing contradictory orders, some panicking and retreating, while others charged blindly into battles they could not win. The command structure was fractured, unable to cope with the rapid shifts in the battlefield. They started to see that humanity's warning had not been a bluff. It had been a promise, a declaration of war. Within the Grand Chamber, the arguments became more heated, accusations flying back and forth. "We cannot sit here and debate while they tear us apart," one council member shouted, eyes wide with fear. "We need to mobilize every fleet, every ship we have left. We have to show them our full strength." Others remained wary. "If we provoke them further, who knows what they are truly capable of?" A voice countered. "We need to think strategically. Find a way to neutralize their weapons, or they will dismantle us piece by piece." But there was little choice left. The Council's forces were in disarray, and their command was crumbling under the weight of the unexpected assault. They had never faced an enemy like this, one who could strike so suddenly, with such overwhelming force, and then vanish before a counterattack could even be launched. For the first time in centuries, the Council felt fear, real, palpable fear that they might lose their grip on power. In a desperate bid to regain control, the Council finally ordered a full mobilization of all their fleets. Every ship, every resource was called upon to defend their remaining territories and prepare for an all-out war against humanity. The grand fleets of the Council, which had once roamed the galaxy unchallenged, were now scrambling to assemble, to prepare for a battle they were not sure they could win. But even as they moved to retaliate, they knew deep down that they had been caught off guard by a foe they had grossly underestimated. The power dynamics in the galaxy were shifting rapidly, and for the first time, they were no longer sure they were the ones in control. Humanity had struck first and struck hard, and now the Council was left with a grim understanding. The balance of power was changing, and their position was no longer secure. Human fleets pressed their advantage with relentless determination, moving deeper into the heart of Council-controlled space. Every maneuver was calculated, every strike precise. Key installations, once thought impregnable, fell one by one. Supply lines that had sustained the Council's fleets for centuries were severed, leaving their forces scattered, disorganized, and weakened. The humans showed no signs of slowing down. They pushed forward with a momentum that seemed unstoppable. With every victory, another transmission was sent, simple and direct. "Run!" The message, always the same, was delivered directly to the Council leaders. It was a constant reminder that humanity was no longer playing by the Council's rules. The warning that had once been dismissed as bravado was now an undeniable declaration of dominance. The Council could not ignore it. They could not silence it. Each time the message arrived, it echoed through their chambers like a drumbeat of defiance, shaking the very foundation of their authority. Inside the Council, the pressure mounted. Divisions that had been simmering for years began to erupt into open conflict. Some factions, now faced with the reality of humanity's power, called for negotiation. They argued that they had underestimated their former allies and that the only way to avoid total destruction was to seek a diplomatic solution. "We must negotiate before it's too late," one counselor urged, her voice edged with fear. "If we continue this fight, we risk everything." Others, however, were not so willing to back down. "We are the Galactic Council," another shouted, pounding his fist on the table. "We do not surrender to threats. We must stand and fight, show them that we will not be intimidated by their tricks and weapons." But beneath the bravado, there was an undeniable undercurrent of doubt. The betrayal was now a point of contention, with some members questioning the wisdom of having provoked humanity in the first place. "Did we push them too far?" one of the elder counselors whispered, a rare note of uncertainty in his voice. "Did we force their hand?" The council's leaders struggled to maintain control, their unity fraying with each passing day. Their fear grew as they realized that the humans had turned their betrayal into a rallying cry, a call to arms that was inspiring not just their own people but others across the galaxy who had long felt oppressed by the Council's rule. Reports began to emerge of other species quietly supporting humanity, providing intelligence, resources, and even covert military assistance. The humans were no longer isolated, they were gaining allies. The realization of the shift in power hit the Council hard. They began to grasp the full extent of humanity's capabilities. The new energy source had been weaponized in ways they had never imagined, turned into a force that defied all conventional tactics and technologies. The Council's most advanced fleets had been torn apart, their defenses rendered useless against weapons that seemed to rewrite the rules of war itself. For the first time, they saw that they were no longer the dominant force in the galaxy. Desperation set in. They understood that they were facing not just a military defeat but the possible end of their rule. The prospect of surrender, once unthinkable, now began to be whispered in the council chambers. "Is it time to consider surrender?" A voice trembled, breaking the uneasy silence that had settled over them. Faces turned, eyes wide, each counselor grappling with the enormity of what was being suggested. Could they admit defeat? Could they yield to those they had once seen as inferior? The debate raged on, but the sense of inevitability grew. The humans had proven themselves more than capable, their message clear and unwavering. They were no longer asking for recognition, they were demanding it, and they had the power to back it up. Then came humanity's final warning. It arrived with no fanfare, no pretense, just the cold, hard truth. Run or face the consequences. It was the last signal they needed to send, a final declaration that left no room for negotiation or misunderstanding. The Council, fully aware of their precarious position, faced a stark choice: flee and save what they could, or fight a battle they were not sure they could win. The chambers were filled with a heavy silence as the leaders sat in stunned disarray. They were on the brink of collapse, their confidence shattered, their power crumbling before their eyes. Some began to rise, gathering their belongings as if preparing to flee. Others sat in numb disbelief, unable to process the reality of their defeat. For the first time in its long history, the Galactic Council found itself at a crossroads, no longer the unchallenged authority it had been for centuries. Humanity's dominance had become undeniable, their warning impossible to ignore. The Council had dismissed them, betrayed them, and now they faced the consequences of that mistake. The Galactic Council, fractured and on the verge of collapse, convened one last time to decide their fate. The chamber was filled with tension, the air thick with fear and uncertainty. The reality of their situation was impossible to ignore. Humanity had become a force that could not be dismissed, their power undeniable, their determination unwavering. The council members knew that their only chance of survival was to sue for peace. After hours of heated debate, they reached a reluctant consensus. They would send envoys to negotiate with humanity. The envoys, carefully chosen for their diplomatic skills and ability to navigate the complexities of human culture, were dispatched with a single mission: find a way to stop the humans before the council's remaining forces were wiped out. Some council members argued for a strategic retreat, suggesting they abandon several territories to regroup and rethink their approach. They believed they could buy time, rebuild, and perhaps one day reclaim their lost power. Others, however, saw no choice but to capitulate. They recognized that any further resistance would only bring more devastation. They understood that the humans had the upper hand and that continuing the fight would lead to their destruction. "We must accept their terms," one of the elder council members said, his voice weary but resolute. "There is no honor in annihilation." The human response came swiftly. They agreed to meet with the envoys, but their terms were clear and uncompromising. The humans demanded an immediate end to the Council's dominion over human colonies. They insisted on reparations for the attacks, the lives lost, the resources destroyed, and the betrayal that had sparked the conflict. And most importantly, they demanded a new seat at the table, one that granted them equal status to any other member of the council. The envoys returned with the terms, and the council had no choice but to accept. Humanity's conditions were harsh, but they were merciful compared to the alternative: further devastation and possibly their own extinction. The humans made it clear that any future betrayal would be met with swift and final retribution. The message was understood by all. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted, and the Council's era of unquestioned rule was over. Across the galaxy, species began to adjust to the new reality. Humanity was no longer seen as an underdog, a minor player in the grand game of galactic politics. They had emerged as a force to be reckoned with, a power respected and feared by those who had once looked down on them. Other species, who had quietly resented the Council's dominance for years, began to voice their support for humanity. The humans had proven that the Council could be challenged, that the old order was not immutable. Yet, beneath the surface, tensions simmered. Some factions within the Council, humiliated and enraged by their defeat, began to plot revenge. They were unwilling to accept the new status quo, believing that they could regain their power if they were patient and cunning. They whispered in the dark, forming secret alliances and planning for the day when they could strike back against the humans and reclaim their place at the top. The galaxy found itself in a state of uneasy peace. The Council was weakened but still present, licking its wounds and biding its time. Humanity, now a major power, began to build new alliances, reaching out to species that had long been marginalized by the Council's rule. Trade agreements were forged, diplomatic channels were opened, and new cooperative projects began to take shape. But everyone knew that this peace was fragile, that the balance of power could shift again at any moment. A new era had begun, one filled with uncertainty and potential. Humanity had won this battle, but they were keenly aware that the galaxy remained a dangerous and unpredictable place. The threat of conflict lingered just beneath the surface, and there were many who still saw humanity as a rival to be contained or destroyed. The humans understood that they would have to remain vigilant, ready to defend their newfound status against any who dared to challenge them. As the Council leaders retreated into their chambers, plotting their next moves, and as humanity strengthened its new alliances, the galaxy waited with bated breath. The balance of power had shifted, but the tension had not dissipated. There was a new order, but it was clear to everyone that peace was always temporary.